thanks to early 20th century economics, an eroding manufacturing base, and the internal combustion engine, trains slowly faded to black. Personal transportation and commercial vehicles increased in popularity. Highways improved, passengers took to the sky, and the rails were left behind. How could the Iron Horse coexist in the space age? Optimists wanted to believe diesel locomotives would save the rails. Modernization wasn't enough. In the 1950s, B&M responded by slashing service and eliminating routes. With milk and mail a memory, the topographically challenged St. J&LC and Barre and Chelsea were among the first to go. B&M was bankrupt by 1970, emerging from the court's protection with Guilford Transportation Industries' 1983 purchase. As online business plummeted, northern New England's once seemingly bulletproof routes were erased from system maps. Rationalization programs stirred up the dust, and the debris is still settling. LVRC, Washington County, Twin State, and New Hampshire, Vermont were a colorful collection of former B&M lines in their twilight years. For most, there was no galloping off in a blaze of glory or dramatic last-minute reprieve. Thankfully, a handful of photographers, videographers, and filmmakers documented these damsels in distress.
When Morrison Knudsen and the governor had a falling out, the shippers on the line hired me basically to form a company, and I formed the Lamoille Valley Railroad Company. There were 10 shippers who became shareholders in the company. We were the first entity to enter into a long-term lease for the operation of the railroad with the state.
January 1st, 1978. The LVRC came to be. They started running with one of MK's Century 420, and then they got their own power shortly after the first of the year, the RS3s off the D&H, painted yellow.
I bought that first set of locomotives for the railroad. Actually, I found an investor who bought them. We worked out a rental arrangement because we didn't have the capital to buy them.
In 1980, rights were obtained over the Central Vermont Railway's Richford branch from Sheldon Junction to St. Albans, displacing traditional routing via Swanton and Fonda Junction.
I can remember the first time I had to get a grade watch. And I went into the local jewelry store, and Bob Jones looked at me and he said, "Why do you need a grade watch for the St. J&LC?" I said, "Well, we're running into St. Albans. We're going to have a grade watch." "Huh," he says, "I think you could use a sundial as fast as you guys go." So, you know, that was pretty much the thought of everybody.
Vermont's centuries-old buildings and cemeteries are ripe candidates for tales of the afterlife. Morrisville's modern engine house seemed an unlikely candidate for rail tales from the other side.
Steve was telling me that he used to lie down to go to sleep, and he felt in the caboose, and he felt a presence looking in on him. He said he felt this several times. And I said, as long as that I slept in there, it was probably for several weeks until I got a place to live. I didn't have any such feeling, but he did, and he said it was real. He was sure there was some presence looking in on him, and the shop itself was said to have been haunted.
It is haunted. You used to be able to hear footsteps. You could hear doors opening and closing. You could hear what sounded like somebody working over on the back side of the engine house. There was even some people I worked with that wouldn't go in there alone. They would not go in there if it was nighttime and they were alone. They stayed out.
More than one occasion, I recall, Steve and I were, actually we were in the pit under, I think it was a 669 at the time, and we were working on a traction motor, and I remember Steve hollering, "Oh shit, look at that." And I remember looking, and you could see, I don't know if it was a hammer or what it was, but it was moving by itself in that shop.
Stowe right there was the biggest, and he did very well. Marketing Stowe, he filled up his train all the time. He used to go to Danville with it.
It was quite a day. Go to St. Albans, get that new power, and bring it to Morrisville. There again, renewed optimism. You know, we were hopeful. We were busy for a while between going to Richford, and we still had excursions, and you know, we were hauling a little bit into Morrisville, not much. That was just about the end.
It didn't occur to anybody until they arrived and Bill Flanders, our mechanic, figured out how to paint them. All you had to do was paint out one line out of CV, and you had LV. We always did things very inexpensively.
They started in St. J, and then Clyde moved everything to Whitefield, and Whitefield became the terminal. And you would operate out of Whitefield into St. J, back to Whitefield. You might go to Woodsville, you might go to Groveton.
While northern New England's rail scene was changing daily, Whitefield's ball signals defied the hands of time. One ball allowed B&M trains to pass over Maine Central's Mountain Division. Two balls permitted Maine Central's passage over the B&M. All trains were required to stop 500 feet from the diamond.
If you were coming down with just the engine, you really wanted to pay close attention to the rails and the sanders and whatnot. If you had an Amtrak car behind you coming down off the hill, you had some really good braking. The brakes on those were fantastic. So you could really hold your speed coming down the hill. Then when we added the White River section on it, we ended up running from St. Johnsbury, switch Gilman, go to Whitefield, then all the way to White River, lay over, and come back the opposite direction the next day. White River, back through to Whitefield, switch Gilman, and end up in St. Johnsbury. When Laney and I were running a lot down to White River Junction, coming back across the old bridge there in Woodsville, you could look out the cab and you could look down at the structural steel of that bridge, and you could always see it shaking underneath us. And I remember Lanny saying, "Don't worry, if it ever cracks and we fall down to the river, you probably would know it just about long enough to realize, oh crap," and that would be as long as you'd remember it. That bridge always made me very nervous.
When we were going there was a couple sightings, and that was it. The B&M had an office down there, a makeshift office. When I was on, that was our terminus. We'd get down there and get some way bills out of this makeshift yard office and put our train together and be gone. That was it.
NHVT's Whitefield-based locomotive trio worked all 3 lines out of town. The 20-mile branch linked Waumbek Junction with the Berlin Mills Railway. For many years, B&M switchers shuttled cars around the clock. Diamond crossings at Waumbek, Quebec, Hazens, and Whitefield were traditional meeting places for B&M and Maine Central trains. Beginning in the 1920s, the competitors began shedding redundant lines. During 1994, a passenger special offered rare mileage over 2 unusual boxed pony truss bridges. B&M created these wooden spans into the First World War, far longer than other large railroads.
We switched every track in the paper mill.
There was times that I would go to Groveton, and of course Groveton is on a grade, and you'd be switching the mill up there. And the power would be wanting for some service, and you'd go down into the mill, and if you stopped going down in the mill, all the crankcase oil would go to one end and the locomotive would shut down.
There once was a railroad up north, they say, that never did haul even one bale of hay. With engines all cruddy and covered with oil, who said their radiators wouldn't boil? Our horns, our bells, and even our lights never did seem to work just right. The mills used to give us lots of money, but now they won't even let us sniff the honey. The pulp, the lumber, and even the clay seem to come less day by day. The signal maintainer asleep by the road dreams of donuts and Twinkies by the trunkload. The track crew's been busy changing a rail, and now a cold brew will soften the trail. At 10 miles an hour on rusty old rail, Wayne and Lanny won't be hauling the mail.